Welcome to the DNX podcast. My name is Sylvia Christman. I am your host, and I'm here today with Jonathan Levi. He's the founder of SuperHuman, and we actually met a couple of years ago on an airplane. Welcome, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you? We met on an airplane crying, both of us.
Yes, we did. It was a very, very defining moment in history, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for everyone that's listening, we met on an airplane the day after the election here in the U.S.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we had a very we formed a very significant friendship that day, and because we shared that moment, and since then we check in regularly, and I wanted to talk to you here online because I think that your life, your lifestyle choices, and the business that you have designed around that is so interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, it really is, and I wanted to share that with our audience to just see if you could share a little bit more about what got you started and like what do you do today? What do you focus on the most?
Yeah, so I actually got started because it was supposed to be a side hustle. I, like so many digital nomads, kind of decided that living in the US just wasn't for me. I didn't like who I was. I didn't like how I was. I wasn't healthy and happy and thriving in the US and in the environment that I was in. I had just graduated business school in Singapore and France. I went to INSEAD, and the startup idea that I had spent half of my MBA working on instead of going to classes. I have a habit every time I do a degree. I did it during my undergrad. I did it during my graduate degree. I work on entrepreneurial ventures instead of paying attention in classes.
Okay.
So, the venture that I'd worked on, we shut it down. It wasn't working. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had, in the process of trying to launch the startup, I'd taken a bunch of online courses, and I'd realized, hey, this online education thing is really going somewhere. I mean, people are creating phenomenal learning experiences online, making great livings and impacting people. My previous business, we were selling luxury automotive enhancements online, like not changing lives in any sense of the imagination. I wanted to do something this time around that positively impacted the world around me. So I turned to online learning and said, hey, this is I still had money coming in from the business that I'd sold, the company that I'd sold, and from rental real estate and stuff like that. And I said, well, if I could just add $1,000 a month, that'll allow me to live in the heart of Tel Aviv and have indefinite runway. I really looked at it as runway. How long can I go without needing to earn an income? And I figured if I could just add $1,000 a month to everything else that I'm doing, I could afford to go on forever if I don't find that big idea. And I applied the skill that I had studied with private teachers, which is accelerated learning, speed reading, and memory, to figuring out this online course thing. How do you build online courses? What are the players? What are the techniques? What are the methods? What makes for successful online learning experiences? So on and so forth. I spent about a month building a course based on all the research that I'd done, launched it, went on a ski vacation, logged on, and realized that I, within the first couple of weeks, had made a few $1,000s. I was like, that's interesting. So I had my runway. I kept flying around the world. I did a bunch of speaking at conferences in East Africa, and I met with startups all over the world from all different kinds of industries, and nothing was really clicking. And then at one point I was in Moscow at a conference and talking to someone about this product that I was pitching, and someone said to me, he's like, you mean to tell me you have 40,000 students, you have a list of 40,000 people, and you're not just creating more content and products for them? I was like, I never thought of it that way. Like, I had so firmly thought that this was my muse, Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week business. And really, I was spending less than 4 hours a week on it. I never thought, like, does this meet my criteria of what I want in my life? And at that time, I had a list, which was, I must be location independent. I shouldn't have to go into an office and manage people every day if I don't want to. I should make a living that allows me to live wherever I want comfortably, not, living in poverty, but in my favorite city in the world. I needed to impact people's lives. I needed to have complete autonomy over who and what I work with and work on. And I realized, like, holy crap, this little side hustle that I'd built is doing all of those things. It was a 6-figure income stream already. And I pivoted, basically, to make a long story short. I pivoted and made this what I was going to do. I started building more online courses, higher end online courses on different topics, such as productivity, such as all these different things that I had learned as a 16-year-old to 23-year-old Inc. 5000 CEO,
right?
Running multiple business ventures, being president of entrepreneurial nonprofits, all these skills that I had been very fortunate to learn, I started digesting and turning around and teaching them. Fast forward a little bit, that was, I think, in late 2014 or early 2015 when I decided to officially make the jump. Today, we've built a multi-million-dollar seven-figure business around the educational products. We have the Becoming Superhuman Podcast. We have the SuperLearner Masterclass. We have the Speed Demon Masterclass, which are accelerated learning and productivity. And now we're also teaching other content creators or would-be content creators how to do it, right? Because so many people out there, such as yourself, Sylvia, we talk about this a lot in our kind of peer coaching calls. So many people out there have so much life experience and are phenomenal coaches or phenomenal authors or phenomenal podcasters, but they haven't figured out how to connect all the pieces together to actually make a living doing what they're doing. And, the stories that I hear are inspiring, but also so heartbreaking. We did, when we launched the Branding You Masterclass, which is our product that helps people create businesses like mine and my partners, Anthony Mativier. We hear these stories, like one guy, Andrew, he and his wife are the 2 or 3 time senior national champions in swing dancing, right? So in their age group, they are the best swing dancers in the country, in the US, and they've always wanted to teach. They're really passionate about it, but they've never been able to actually make a living doing it. So this guy, Andrew, is a high school teacher. He's making, the abysmal salary that we pay our high school teachers in this society. And it's just like, oh my God, you have so much freaking knowledge, right? That the world would love. I mean, how many people out there? I know I told Andrew this. I was like, I've always wanted to learn swing dancing, but the barrier of the first few lessons, I went to a swing dance studio and I was so intimidated because I'm going to have to look like a jackass for the first 10 lessons. And I said, if you could help me learn online the basic steps so that when I at least get to meet my partner, I know the terms, I know I'm competent enough. It's like how many young men in this world would love to learn that? Right. In the comfort of their own home. And that's one of 30 different stories where we're like, wow, there's so many people who have so much knowledge to share. And not by any sense of the imagination are they just another guy or gal out there. These are people who are like national champions. We had another guy who wrote the book on diagnosing common flaws in radiology. So there's a huge margin of error in radiology. It's not an exact science, but this guy did the research and published the paper teaching radiologists how to minimize those wrong or false positive diagnoses. And it's like, but the book doesn't make a living. He still has to practice medicine. Just imagine if he could go out in the world and educate hospitals and educate medical practitioners, teaching this method that he's developed. So pretty interesting stuff. And that's where we are today. That's what we're passionate about.
Super fascinating. I mean, your work keeps fascinating me every day. I do.
Thank you.
I do look at your courses quite frequently. I find them so interesting. There's one thing I find so interesting about it is that I'm someone who fails and learns by doing, while a lot of these courses are for people that want to learn before they get started. Right. And, do you agree?
Well, that's one of the things that we've been really, really focused on, because what we realized is people like a passive learning experience, but they need an active learning experience. Mm-hmm. And I know this because of all the research I've done on the way the adult brain works and a lot of the seminal research by my good buddy, Malcolm Knowles in the 1950s, that we know that adults learn differently than children. Children learn because they're told, and everyone has that experience. You talk to everyone, and I've had the chance to talk to thousands of people about this, and they go, yeah, along about 12 or 13 years old, I started asking, why the hell am I learning this? Mm-hmm. And it's not a coincidence that we all ask that. That's when our brains are maturing, and adults need this pressing need and they need immediate applicability. So one of the things we've really focused on in our courses is applying the research that we know about the way that adults learn and adding exercises in. And we started okay at it, and now we've gotten really, really good at it, where we will actually have people design their own exercises. If you're an accountant, you're going to have different exercises that I want you to do for yourself and assign yourself than if you're a med student or a paralegal. Mm-hmm. And so I just hired a new head of customer experience, who I think is now the highest paid person on our staff. And his whole job is to go through our courses and ensure that every single one of the 4 different types of learners is having every single box ticked off. They're learning what we call brute force learning, right? So they're learning the same thing in 3 or 4 different ways to help reinforce those neural connections. And I think that's the big flaw in online learning today. And that's where you see these phenomenal courses stand out. Both in terms of pricing and in terms of customer satisfaction, is are you able to guide the student to actualize the learning in a way that is on par with or even beyond what they're experiencing in a university setting or in a premium coaching setting, and so on and so forth. Where I get really interested, apropos kind of the digital nomad, Tim Ferriss automation lifestyle, is how do you automate intimacy, right? So I have a community of over 130,000 students that I'm very blessed are invested in our products. How do I create intimate interactions, as in show concern and care and be there for the student at the right time? And how do I use technology and also training of my staff to make it so that I or my thoughts, ideas, messages, concerns, and cares can touch every single one of those students in a way that's scalable?
Yeah. Okay. That's so interesting. So what are the 4 types of learners?
Well, we have people who learn better through audio, people who learn better through doing, which really all of us reflect all of these things. We have people who learn better through reading, and we have people who learn better through, I think it's narrative. It's kind of split on how these are divided, but the reason that I'm not so subscribed to it is because at the end of the day, we're all visual learners, and the whole system behind our courses, as you know, you've taken them, is reconnecting people to the fact that we are all visual learners, right? So when people say, oh, well, some people are auditory learners and some people learn better through textbooks, that's a matter of habit, not of natural predisposition. And so I kind of throw that whole baby out.
You think so?
Oh, I know so. Yeah. In fact, just recently I was digging in, because people ask me this a lot. I'll be on stage and someone will say, well, what if you're an auditory learner? How does the whole visual mnemonic memory palace, creating visual symbols and all that stuff, how does that work for me? And I go, you're not an auditory learner. You've just been forced to sit in a chair. Inevitably, when I ask these people, I'm like, what did you study? It's never the people who studied biology or art who say, yeah, I'm an auditory learner. It's always the people who are like, well, I studied history. I'm like, how many times throughout your 25 years of educational indoctrination were visualizations and complex kind of visual experiences a part of your education? They go, none. I studied mathematics. I studied whatever it may be. People who studied physics are like, a lot. And that's why they would claim that they're visual learners. In any case, what it comes down to is retraining yourself to reconnect to the visualization aspect of our brains. And the reason I'm so confident is that a lot of research has started coming out from the Riken MIT Center and from Duke and University of North Carolina, where we're actually seeing that memory is inextricably linked in the brain to location. Well, how do our brains know location, right? Because of the visual stimuli in that location. And so when I ask you, where did you and I meet? You're not thinking about even the emotions of that moment. You're thinking about okay, well, let's do a test, right? So you and I met.
Yep.
Who was in the window seat, you or me?
You were.
Okay. And was I sitting on your left or on your right?
You were sitting to my left.
Do you remember what pants you were wearing?
No.
Now I'm pushing it. Anyway.
I gotta think. Yoga pants, most likely. But that's an assumption because I always wear them on planes.
Regardless, you were wearing black leather pants. But regardless, you know exactly where I was. you know exactly where we were in the plane.
Yeah.
And it's because memory is inextricably linked to the brain. We know this because of some really interesting research where they kind of designed like a man-made virus that allows them to track the flow of blood through the brain when people are creating memories. Well, when mice are creating memories. Anyway, complete tangent, but more and more research is discovering that in fact, memory is linked to location, that you can't have memory without some kind of location or visual stimuli. So really, really interesting.
Super fascinating. Yeah. I mean, I know for me, all of my memory is visual for sure. I memorize everything visually. Mm-hmm. That's how I know when I lose something. If I can't visualize it anymore, I know I lost it. It's so big. I mean, honestly.
Yeah. And so the method is, I mean, when you meet people like Joshua Foer or Nelson Dellis, who's become a good buddy of mine, people who've won international or national memory competitions by memorizing 24 decks of cards back to back in an hour. And each one of these people tell you, oh, I had a lousy memory. I had a lousy sense of visualization. And you realize these people were able to retool. I recently wrote an email to my audience, and I likened it to upgrading your car from gas to electric, right? It's cleaner, it's faster, it's more efficient, and it's a smoother way of operating. But we've all been conditioned to operate on gas, which is repeating things over and over, auditorily memorizing them. You know, we all repeat the number in our head and then we transpose it and screw it up. When you convert yourself to operating on visualizations, it's like putting your brain on the fuel that it's meant to run on. And you'll find that you're able to memorize huge amounts of information, scary huge amounts of information. And paradoxically, you'll be able to memorize things that you always said you were really bad at. I always said that I have no gift for music. And then what they say, the shoemaker goes barefoot or the baker's children go hungry. I think is how you say it in German, right?
I don't know.
I sat down and I was like, well, what if I just looked at music as a visual challenge, right? And I built out a map, a mind palace of all the different keys, right? Key signatures and what notes are in those key signatures. And within 20 minutes, I'd memorized the core of how music theory works, right? Like I knew every single key. I knew what notes were in it, what notes were not in it, and what order they came in. So what are all of the fifths that come after it? And I'm not a musical person, right? I've struggled all my life. I took piano lessons, failed out, guitar lessons, failed out. But now I'm able to sit down on a piano, and if I watch someone playing it, I can tell you exactly what key they're in. I can tell you exactly what notes they're in. And it's just because I put it into a language that my brain understands and that everyone's brain understands, which is, very simple. What are the 12 different stations in the room that I stored all this information in, and what is sitting on the desk? The classic memory palace technique.
The classic memory palace technique. Can you elaborate on that? What does that mean?
Yeah, the memory palace technique is something that was discovered by, of course, now ironically, the shoemaker goes barefoot. I'm going to forget the name. I believe it was Simonides, about 2,500 years ago. What he discovered is that if you connect things to location in your mind and visualize, then you can remember effectively anything. So the example I always give people is go to your childhood home where you grew up, whether or not you've been there in the last 20 years. Go to your parents' bedroom, which is the room that you were probably least welcome in. Mm-hmm. Now go to your mother's side of the bed. Mm-hmm. Now go to the nightstand. At this point, many people go, oh, there wasn't a nightstand. My parents are minimalist. But go to the nightstand if there was one and tell me what was on the nightstand. And 99.99% of people that I've talked to go, yeah, okay, it was a clock. And then I go, what color was the clock? And they go, it was brown and it had red letters. And I've actually discovered that like a huge proportion of people in the United States growing up in the 1980s, their parents had the exact same radio alarm clock from GE just by doing this, like really, really funny random. They're like, it was a GE brown alarm clock. And I'm like, no way. Pull up Google Images. They're like, yeah, that one. I'm like, shit, my mom had that too. I think she still has it there, by the way. And it's just crazy. Like, and if people say, oh, okay, well, I moved around a lot growing up. Where are the shampoo bottles in your shower right now? Useless piece of information, but your brain stores it automatically because this is relevant. This is survival relevant information. If you forget where the food is stored, if you forget where, your way home to the tribe, if you forget where the watering hole is, these are all make or break survival skills. And so we've evolved it naturally. The memory palace technique just teaches you to convert any piece of information, whether that's names, numbers, faces, cards, points in a book, historical dates, names like Simonides, musical keys, anything that you want, you can learn to convert into visual symbols and then store them in a series of memory palaces, which you can build ad nauseum, ad infinitum, if you will, for anything and everything you want. I've memorized multiple TED Talks and coached clients on memorizing their TED Talks using memory palaces. I've helped chess prodigies to convert all the different steps that they need to take at the highest levels of the game into memory palaces. I've memorized the Russian grammatical case system, all kinds of weird stuff. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff once you learn it.
I want to do this now. Yeah. I can. Yeah, I do. Because
I believe you are enrolled in our course.
I am. But then again, I'm also somebody that starts a lot of things at the same time. And then, I have to be super good. But yeah, I watched a bunch of your stuff last night because I was so fascinated by it.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Because, I believe it because I memorize my entire world visually. I really do. I've always done that ever since I was a kid. I always thought it's because I'm dyslexic and reading things itself was always really hard for me. So if I visualized it, I could just comprehend it very easily, So when I reading and comprehending information, but just reading the paragraph, I have to read it 2-3 times. But if I visualize the paragraph, I can tell what it says because I can just read it back.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a matter
that's the thing, right?
Training all of us to operate in that way because that's the natural way that we learn.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's why I create PowerPoints for my keynotes, not because I like to use the PowerPoints, but because I can memorize the information and my visual cues for content based on the PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't use it most of the time, but I create all of my information on a PowerPoint because it's easier for me to actually write down the content based on each slide because I put down keywords and conditions to it.
Well, and it's easier for your audience to memorize it once they have visual cues as well.
Oh, yeah. I don't think about the audience, but that's a good one. I think about myself all the time.
Start there.
Okay, I'll start there. Well, good thing that it works. I've always done it that way because I can't focus on what I want to say if I were to just say it or write it on a blank piece of paper. Using a PowerPoint to draft it out and organize the content is easier for me to organize my thoughts. But good to know. Wow. Okay. You just blew my mind. We're already at the end of our time. Can you believe it?
I can believe
23
it.
minutes.
We both have no problem talking.
I know we do. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This was amazing. We're going to post
Pleasure.
Ways to get in touch with you below this podcast. So if people want to learn more, take one of your courses. I love them, so I'm sure other people love them too. They can follow the links below.
I can give people a link as well right on the air, which is so easy. It's JLE.vi. So just like my name, J Levy, but with a dot in the middle. JLE.vi.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Talk to you soon.
See you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Before I leave you, I want to invite you into my world. Join us at the DNX Festival in September in Lisbon. If you go to our website and use the promo code podcast50, you get an extra €50 off your ticket. And subscribe to this channel and leave us a review if you can. We will review these frequently, and you can leave us a question that we will answer live online. Until next time.